to be here, and thank you for the ODC for hosting me on this session about unleashing the power of org design for cultural transformation. Thank you everybody for attending. Because we seem to be a small group here, I would probably say, just to set the tone for this next hour, let's try to make it, as interactive as possible, as engaging as possible. However you'd like to engage or ask questions, whether it's just jumping in and asking a question verbally, which sometimes is much easier, or just raising your hand or putting something on the chat box, please let's do that. Either way, I'm going to try to allot around 5 to 10 minutes towards the end of the session for questions specifically. So I hope everybody can hear me and see me well. If you can, just put something on the chat box or give me a thumbs up or something like that. Great. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much. Okay, great. A little bit about myself. My name is Rani Salman. I'm managing Caliber Consulting. We're a boutique consulting firm that focuses on strategy execution and organization design. We are based in Dubai, UAE. However, we have clients globally in the US, in Canada, in the Middle East, in Africa, Asia. But our main focus is strategy execution, which I want to talk a little bit about today. And of course, org design and culture both play a critical role in getting strategies executed. A bit of background about myself is I'm not an author. I'm not an academic, a researcher. I've spent most of my career, close to 20 years in business. Mostly actually in strategy consulting and moving in different kind of strategic realms with some operational consulting, HR consulting, pure strategy consulting, performance management, org design. So I like to bring a lot of practical examples to the table, which I'm sure everybody can appreciate. And, of course, rely on theory a little bit, but more on experience and practical examples. So I'll try to my best in the minimal time that we have today to do that and drop some insights for everybody that's attending the course. So basically the structure, we're going to do a little bit of introduction, demystify culture, which is a very contentious issue that there's many definitions for. I'm going to give you my perspective on what I think culture is, and then talk about how we can best apply org design to drive cultural transformation and change, and then leave some time for some questions in the end. So again, please, any questions, any comments you'd like, please engage and interrupt if you have to during this session. The first question, perennial question that I have that discuss a lot, again, in the realms of strategy, which is really my first passion as a practitioner and as a consultant, is what's more important? Is it the strategy of an organization, plotting the organization in the right direction, in a winning direction, or is it the execution? And of course, we need both to be successful and to be winning organizations. However, the question that I have for you, and I'm going to put up a poll just to start things up, if you had to only choose one, okay, the easy answer is, of course, we need both. We need a great strategy. We need great execution to be a winning organization. But if you could only choose one, what would it be? So let me just put up this poll here. Hopefully all of you can see it. And feel free to give me your thoughts on that. Okay. We started strong on execution. Now strategy is catching up. Okay, great. So I hope you see the results now. So we have a majority putting it on execution, and some people also putting it on strategy. If you feel to share why, please on the chat box put it in. I think it's always interesting to hear other people's perceptions on this. But in reality, you need both, of course, to be a successful organization. And basically, and if anyone wants to put something in chat, please do. Otherwise, I will just give you my perspective on it. Look, to get a great strategy is something that's not always too difficult to do. So let's hear what somebody says. If you don't know where you are going, any road will do. Yes, Mark, that's absolutely true. Even if you don't know where you're going, execution will let you try things out so you can learn. Absolutely. Easier to get a strategy, harder to get execution right. Totally agree. How many strategy decks? Yes, absolutely. How many strategy decks are sitting on covers? Absolutely. Look, I think both are absolutely critical, but getting a strategy right, you can bring leadership together, get them into the right room, hire some consultants, and you can potentially come up with a strategy, your critical choices, your roadmap for the future. Execution is something that's ingrained in the organization. It takes years and years to build. It relies on culture. It relies on processes. It relies on leadership. It relies on, in essence, the organization design has to be on point for execution to happen. So I'm somebody who would take execution over strategy any day if I had one of them to choose. However, in reality, you need both. Okay, you can have a great machine or a great car. If you're plotting in the right direction, it could lead you off a cliff. But if you're going to choose one, I would always go for execution. And why do I bring that up? Because in reality, also, if you look at the stats, most of the strategies fail, and I've seen many of them. Working in strategy for most of my career, fail not because the strategy was wrong, or they took the wrong choices, or they put the wrong objectives or targets in place. The reality is it was mostly due to the execution that made it fail. And then Sharon writes a great book on why CEOs fail, and he really says that strategy is less than half the battle. In the majority of failures, it's usually execution, bad execution, versus bad strategy. That's the real problem. So for us, like I said, this is just kind of introduction to our organization and strategy execution, but it's very related to the topic we're talking about. For us, and if you look at some other strategy execution models, popular models out there, they don't often include things on culture and organization design, operating models, strangely enough. You can do the research, you can look at some of the most popular strategy execution models out there, and for some reason they tend to forget about these things. But from our perspective, for strategy execution to happen, of course, you need that winning strategy that we talked about, but you also have to have the right operating model. And here, when we talk about the operating model, we're essentially talking about the organization itself, from the structure to the processes to the technology, etc., all working together in a system to serve the purpose of the organization. And of course, we all know that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So without the right culture, people, and leadership in place, your strategy execution will falter. And these are the three practices that we focus on as an organization. Here are some sort of projects we would typically do in the realms of strategy, organization design, and people and culture. And here are some of the training programs that we do. So, we're both a consulting and training company. Our training program on organization design is recognized by the ODC. I think it's the only one in the Middle East and Africa that is recognized by them. But this is something that we focus on, and these three pillars integrated with each other really drive strategy execution. And that's the philosophy on these things. Great, let's go for another poll. And now we're getting into more the topic that we have today, which is about organizational culture, organization design. The poll is, what percentage of people in organizations think that their workplace culture needs to change? So let me put up this poll. Give me a second. So hopefully you can see it. So what percentage of people in organizations think that their workplace culture needs to change? Okay. We're getting good answers. You know, typically I get sometimes between strategy and execution, it's kind of 50-50, or sometimes siding more from strategy. So I'm glad to see some of these answers here. Okay, I think everybody has more or less put their answers. Let me share the results. Okay, so majority says 80%. Excellent. In reality, that answer is absolutely correct. So in a global survey that took place pre-corona, actually, I'm curious to see how it would fare today during corona, but 80% of people say that their workplace culture needs to change. Okay, where in 2013 it was significantly less at 51%. I scratched my head to wonder why there's such a big difference, but probably the complexity of organizations and how they've grown could be a contributor to that. But that's a pretty alarming, increase over a period of 6 years. And if you look at what leaders think and what employees think, there is a big disconnect, and that's not limited to culture. I think that's limited to many things, where we see the C-suite and the employees having very differing thoughts and opinions on various things. But we know that there is a problem with organizational culture. And actually, that's what created my passion around organizational culture, because I would meet with so many executives. We would do a lot of strategic analysis on organizations. And one common theme across all the organizations we assessed was always some complaints, some problems around organizational culture, but little action taken and little, walking the talk around organizational culture, which got me thinking, and was one of the reasons I kind of pursued more interest in cultural change. And given today, and if we look at some of the leaders in the market, Airbnb, Tesla, Facebook, I mean, these are disruptors in their industries, right? And in today's dynamic, globalized world that's filled with disruption, it's very hard to hold on to competitive advantage. And if you talk to a lot of strategists and you ask them, what is the future of strategy? A lot of them tell you it revolves around the notion that it's going to be very hard for companies to hold on to competitive advantage. And the most successful companies will have that capability where they can hold on to a competitive advantage, sense other ones quickly that are coming up, because they will know that that competitive advantage will not last forever, and jump into them. But something that's sustainable in terms of competitive advantage, of course, is the organizational culture. And, the statistics show that there is a clear correlation between financial results and organizational culture. So the stronger the cultural score, however you want to measure it, in this case, it was a diagnostic that was used here. The stronger the cultural score of organizations, the better their earnings are. And we don't need to look at surveys to know that intuitively a better culture creates better engagement, more productivity, more motivation, and it's definitely something that every leader should focus on. Let me just pull up the chat and see if there's any questions up till now. Will this presentation be shared with participants after the call? I'm not sure. You have to ask ODC about that, but I'm happy to share it. I have no issues with sharing it. Okay, the other comments were related more to strategy execution. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very beautiful point, that today's strategy is more about test and learn. And actually in our strategy courses, we use simulations that basically promote that experimentation, testing and learn approach, versus this approach of sitting down, analyzing a bunch of data, and then taking a lot of time and coming up with a strategy which will probably be obsolete by the time that all the analysis is done. Yeah, absolutely. It's a test and learn experimental approach based on future foresight and based on agility, really, in terms of doing strategy. Moving forward, we talked about the importance of culture. I think, all leaders know that it's important. Okay, hopefully. The stats say that 68% of leaders believe the culture is a source of advantage. Even 76% believe culture can be changed. And that's something also that's contentious. Some people will argue no to that. Some people will say, it's the way we do things around here, it's very difficult to change, etc. 81% believe that an organization that lacks a high performance culture is doomed to mediocrity. Okay, so you can see that there is a large percentage that believe, and this was a leadership survey that was done, that culture is quite important. It's changeable. If you don't have great culture, your performance is going to be bad, all the great stuff that we're talking about. But fewer than 10% claim that they have succeeded in building an effective culture. So today, and even in previous times, there's a huge cultural gap that we call, where culture is a problem. We know it's important, but people are not able to address it properly. Why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. I mean, we cannot forget the reason that it's extremely hard to change culture, right? That's one thing. But another thing is that oftentimes I believe organizations don't have the knowledge, capabilities, and tools, right? And obviously commitment from the top sometimes to change the culture. And this requires education, this requires a capability and commitment to really make it successful. As the cartoon hilariously says, and I've met a lot of leaders in my life that are not very different than this, where I want a coherent new corporate culture that will take us into the third millennium, and I want it by this afternoon. So, understanding culture and how to influence it is something that there's a lot of contention around, and not everybody will know how to do it in organizations, at least the ones that I've seen and worked with in my career. But I think, one common element, there is never a silver bullet for anything, right? But if you want to talk about silver bullets or what's the most important thing there is for cultural change, it comes with leadership commitment, just like any change, right? I mean, cultural change is part of the big change management umbrella of various changes that we can take in an organization, whether it's a strategic transformation, whether it's a new IT system, cultural change is that exactly. And I think that the best leaders understand the importance of culture and its role in creating next level performing organizations. I really like this quote by the CEO of Airbnb, and I use it a lot because, why is culture so important? The stronger the culture is in an organization, the less need for corporate processes, policies, structures, all those things. So if you focus on the culture and you make it strong, everything kind of follows, and it's much easier to do. But if you see as quotes of some of these other leading executives of very successful companies, culture is at the forefront of their agenda, and that's a very important thing. So anybody going through a cultural transformation, they have to try to see that through, whether it's trying to do a kind of influencing the leader and the leadership team of the importance, but that's a key first step in any cultural change initiative. But something very important as well, and sometimes we give the formal leaders maybe too much credit than they should get, because in reality, a lot of cultural change doesn't always come from the formal leadership and them talking about the importance of culture and talking about the importance of changing certain behaviors, and most importantly, role modeling those behavioral changes, which really ultimately represent culture. But the informal organization plays a big part, right? Why? Because people are very much influenced by their colleagues, very much influenced by their peers. And if you want to scale up behavioral change, okay, which ultimately is cultural change, it doesn't happen by communicating what new behaviors we want in the organization. It often happens, it happens through various ways, but one key way and one